In 1913, Aston Martin began as Bamford and Martin, when owners Robert Bamford and Lionel Martin became partners to sell and manufacture cars in London. Bamford and Martin Limited would get their start selling Singer vehicles from their London dealership and garage, where they also serviced GWK and Calthorpe vehicles. Their first car was a modified 1908 Isotta Fraschini fitted with a 4-cylinder Coventry Simplex engine. Martin would race their cars in the Aston Hill Climb about 40 miles northwest of London, where his success gave birth to the name Aston Martin in 1914. 1 year later they would open their first works at Henniker Mews in Kensington, where the first production Aston Martin would be built in March 1915. But with the outbreak of World War I, production was halted and the machinery was sold. In 1920 Bamford and Martin Limited would reopen in Kensington, and within 2 years Aston Martin cars were competing on the International Grand Prix circuit. Despite early racing success by 1925, Bamford and Martin was forced to file for bankruptcy, only to be resurrected in 1926 by a group of investors who formed Aston Martin Motors Limited and moved operations to the former Whitehead Aircraft Limited Hanworth Works in Feltham. Under new leadership, Aston Martin was gaining a reputation for superb engineering and design. The Harford Special would see much success, setting several land speed records and taking 10 podiums, including 4 first-place finishes in the 1926 to 1927 seasons. And in 1928 the company would enter their first car in the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Before going further, let me tell you what is 24-hour Le Mans race. The 24 Hours of Le Mans is auto racing's Boston Marathon, a brutal test of endurance where competitors race stunningly fast cars for 24 straight hours at speeds that can exceed 200 miles per hour on the fastest section of the incredibly long 8.5-mile Circuit de la Sarthe road course, Le Mans, France. A to C Bertelli, a designer and racing driver, and his partner William Renwick, an engineer who had developed a 4-cylinder 1.5-liter overhead camshaft, joined Aston Martin in 1926. Most of Bertelli's designs were 2-seat sports cars with bodywork done by his brother Enrico Bertelli. A few long chassis 4-seaters, dropheads, and sedans were also built under Bertelli's direction. During the 1930s, Aston Martins would be competitive in Le Mans 24 Hours, the Italian Mille Miglia, the French Grand Prix, and the RAC Tourist Trophy. Cars were once again put on the sideline as World War II saw the factory shifting to produce aircraft components. Post-war, the Huddersfield gear and machine tools manufacturer David Brown Limited bought Aston Martin and Lagonda, moving all operations to Newport, Pugnell, home to Aston Martin Works to this day. With Lagonda came their 2.5-liter WO Bentley-designed engine that would go on to power the DB series of cars. In 1956 the DBR1 was built to win the World Sports Car Championship. After years of development, 1959 would be the year that Aston Martin wins both the World Sports Car Championship and Le Mans 24 Hours. Coming off of the success of 1959, Aston Martin solidified its place as a true manufacturer of exotic sports cars and began to see more commercial success. The 1964 James Bond film, Goldfinger, would catapult Aston Martin into the limelight of an international audience, with the silver DB5 becoming one of the most iconic movie cars of all time. The DB5 would be produced until 1970, with the more modern DBS being built from 1967 to 1972, the DBS V8 from 1969 to 1972, and just 7 DBS Lagonda sedans built before financial troubles would again strike. The 1970s was a bad time to be building expensive, high-performance cars, with the worldwide recession, the oil crisis of 1973, and increasing regulations on emissions and safety in the USA had by 1974 pushed Aston Martin into bankruptcy. In 1975, a new group of investors led by businessman Peter Sprague from Toronto purchased the fledgling company and pledged to turn the company around. 6 months later, the new company, Aston Martin Lagonda, opened with 100 employees. The new range included the 1977 V8 Vantage, the convertible Volante in 1978, and the futuristic new Lagonda sedan, based on the V8 model, the fastest four-door in the world at the time. Peter Sprague didn't just want Aston Martin Lagonda to produce the best sedan in the world. He also wanted to build Aston's first true supercar. The project was codenamed DPK 901, better known as the Bulldog. In 1986, the company revived its relationship with Italian coach builder, resulting in the Aston Martin V8 Giotto, built between 1986 to 1990. 1987 would see James Bond return to an Aston Martin in The Living Daylights, starring Timothy Dalton in the V8 Vantage. In 1988, Ford Motor Company purchased Aston Martin, adding it to its portfolio of brands, which already included British carmaker Jaguar, called the Premier Automotive Group. Under Ford, the new 1989 Virage and Vantage brought Aston into the modern era, with several variants being produced, including the Volante and Le Mans. Aston Martin would produce some of its most enduring sports cars, the DB9, Vantage, and the Aston Martin V12 Vanquish within this era. In 2002, everyone's favorite international spy, 007, would be behind the wheel of a modern Aston Martin again. The Aston Martin V12 Vanquish from Die Another Day reconnected the brand to the films and again created a new generation of fans. In 2005, the DB9R made its debut competing in GT sports car racing, including a return to the 24 Hours of Le Mans. The first Aston Martin Rapide was produced at the Magna Steyr factory in Graz, Austria in 2010. Rapide production would return to the UK in 2012, bringing all manufacturing in-house once again. But 2012 would be another year that would have Aston Martin looking for new investors. 2016 saw the first fruits of a technology partnership Aston Martin signed with Mercedes-Benz, with the new DB11 featuring a Mercedes-AMG engine and Mercedes electronics for the entertainment, navigation, and other systems. The 2019 V8 Vantage, unveiled in late 2017, employed Mercedes twin-turbo V8 and electronic and infotainment systems. In 2016, Aston Martin also released the MRB 001 concept, which would go on to become the 2017 Aston Martin Valkyrie hybrid supercar in collaboration with Red Bull Racing. The name Valkyrie comes from the mythological Norse guides who lead soldiers to Valhalla. A track-only version of the Valkyrie was introduced at the 2018 Geneva Motor Show. In late 2018, Aston Martin marked another milestone by launching the Aston Martin DBX, the brand's first crossover SUV, powered by the 4.0-liter twin-turbo Mercedes-AMG V8 that produces 542 horsepower and 516 pound-ft of torque. 2020, Racing Point F1 team owner Lawrence Stroll bought a 16.7% stake in Aston Martin, and Racing Point was rebranded as Aston Martin F1 for the 2021 season. The Aston Martin AMR21 was unveiled in March 2021, becoming Aston's first Formula One car in 61 years. Aston Martin CEO, Andy Palmer, has a plan to double sales over the next few years, and thanks to new products and a strong financial position that has taken the company from in the red to profitable. Aston Martin launched a modified logo. This updated logo celebrates the company's position as makers of the most exquisitely addictive performance cars and is centered on its new brand motto, Intensity Driven.
If you watched the video up to now, then please leave a like and subscribe our channel for early updates.